Azuba, Takatan to Zuba, direct video of the Retreat Thosamling. Zuba the door and Zuba Zuba led the candidates. Zuba top dance and now the Jenny chose that. Today is Zuba said that they were going to be there. Thought that then I took Mila Japan, Zishitan to a checker. Then I said, Zuba did was at the Jechata. Is another than by which you realize that. Honey, you're more the cutting contributors. That did you more the that one to make a teleshani, Digipa, Katuchi, and Kudichupa, and Isabella Esra. And Shedan the Landula, the Jula Pesha, nothing of the right Shedan Landula, the Shedan the Jula Peshani, and they, I think, of Shedan Jambala. Shedan the road, Shedan Landula, Nankadin, the Chagula,
Chung.
Eagle and
Yes. Jerry.
Eagle and Chung.
Eagle and the Chung. Chowder.
That and the Shashudi and the Chali Jula Katicha, Odina saying that I'm to the Shadan, the dark.
So then now we will continue with the text itself in our discussion about the 6 great perfections. And now we are at the 27th verse, which goes on to discuss about the perfection of forbearance. So the root text reads, "Forbearance is the supreme ornament for those who have power. It's the greatest fortitude against the agonies of afflictions. Against its enemy, the snake of hate, it is a Garuda cruising in the sky. Against the weapon of harsh words, it's the strongest armor." So then, when we're talking about forbearance, then in the Buddhist tradition, rather than having a sense of power, of overpowering other people, then a true sense of power is understood to be overcoming the negative afflictions within ourselves. Such a person is understood to be powerful. So this is the point that is being made here. Forbearance is the supreme ornament for those who have powers. So what the Buddhists would consider to be powerful is those who have been able to overcome the afflictions in themselves. So then forbearance for such powerful beings is like the crowning jewel or the supreme ornament, and it's the greatest fortitude against the agonies of afflictions. So then, whether you are able to kind of not give into the afflictions, whether you are able to give into whether you are able to stop yourself from giving into the afflictions or not depends on the level of forbearance that you have cultivated. So it's the greatest fortitude against the agonies of afflictions. Against its enemy, the snake of hate, it is a Garuda cruising in the sky. So then the greatest danger in our cultivation of forbearance is this sense of aversion that we have towards things and people and situations that we don't like. So then against its enemy, the snake of hate, it is a Garuda cruising in the sky. So Garuda is a mythical creature which begins to hunt a snake. So the metaphor here being used is that the forbearance or the cultivation of forbearance is like a Garuda that cruises in the sky, and then when it spots a snake, then it immediately preys on that snake. So maybe we can understand that it's just an eagle cruising in the sky, and the eagle cruising in the sky and hunting for snake. And then against the Shivadi Mutane Sumara, Tsizugleti. That's the Rujura.
춘차지를 계셔라. 지주 춘차. 지주 춘다. 사이 거쳐야 근데 지다 지주부디기 간다. 근데 이제 버디 아니 지주디 춘차를 가서 나가서 춘차 있는 지가 거기 이제 버서 또 거를 부딪히고라. 근데 이제 버디기 아니 지주버서 가서 저 예부된 거에는 미버서 좀 돌아. 아니 지주 춘다. 사이 거쳐야 있는데 라차다 그래서 대달시니 되게 주베기 안에 가나가나 샤주도 좀 시니 아니 대달시니 저쪽 거쳐라 근데 다 저번에 초도 저번에 근데 이상 아니 딜라 거쳐라 딜라 차라 차라 안 넘버 맞아 주다 근데 저번 근데 보면 지수로 보면 시다나 보면 아직 근데 수처럼 이거 근데 때문에 하도 주지라 되게 나도 때문에 아니 하도 주지 보면 이제 공부를 엔조게 장장에 대달치를 지다니 좀 그러냐 아니 근데 무슨 지금도 나오서 다 한다 차가 무슨 지역에서 이들을 아니 그러니 저거 공부가 되도 한번 하주 주고 이랬으라 근데 지금 아니 그것도 그래서 내가 다시 치시고
So then continuing with the last line of the 27th verse, against the weapon of harsh words it's the strongest armor. Knowing this, we should habituate ourselves with the excellent armor, with the armor of excellent forbearance by all possible means. I, a yogi, have practiced in this manner. You who aspire for liberation too should do likewise. So then the last line, against the weapon of harsh words is the strongest armor. So whenever we are attacked with harsh words, with slander and so forth, then we need a sense of forbearance in order not to give into retaliating immediately to these harsh words. So against the weapon of harsh words is the strongest armor. Knowing this, we should habituate ourselves with the armor of excellent forbearance by all possible means. So the 27th verse talks about the quality of forbearance and how the cultivation of forbearance is the perfect antidote to each of these particular instances of afflictions, such as hate, harsh words, and so forth. So knowing the quality of the cultivation of forbearance, then we should learn to habituate ourselves to contemplate again and again, and then to try to internalize this quality in ourselves in order to and to kind of wear it like an armor all the time, so that we do not give in to afflictions. We do not give in to a moment of weakness wherein hate begins to motivate us, or wherein we do not give into moments wherein we immediately retaliate in situations wherein we feel that there is aggression. Yes.
And Zubale, Zubegi, Jeburu, Karashavanara, that Yoshimine, Mindana, Zichim, picture, Zuba, then the that's a bean, Chanka Zuba, chick, Sozola, Yama, Droma, Chico, the Karina, chicken duty, the chicken, Zuba, Kunuso, Sozo, Chitrobo, Tari, Chimmy, Gangi, Roger Sabila, Chitomi, Kijantawa, so they would be
So then what is the result of cultivating forbearance? What is the karmic result of cultivating forbearance? Then it is explained that in this life you begin to attract more friends, more people who you can call close to yourself. And then in the next life it is explained that you will be born in a form wherein you have a natural sense of charisma, you have a natural sense of magnificence about yourself. So this is the kind of karmic result of cultivating forbearance. And then the opposite is, if you do not practice forbearance and begin to retaliate to all instances of small irritation, then you begin to lose friends in this life. You begin to alienate people, you begin to push people away from you, and then you end up isolated, lonely.
Don't let 제어는 변의 제 차야입니다. 진주 넘어를 수제 무슨 까지 했으라 대다 좀 용이나 초에서의 지정을 대대상 좀 하던 조사 지상 좀 거기를 지자로 수 마가사지 무슨 들어가잖아 대적을 좀 대치기도 마음만 줘야지 줘야지다 수수도 센터 초에서 기본 좀 셔야 무슨 정말 매번
So then, if we are always agitated by the smallest of irritation, and if our mind is always agitated by the smallest sources of anger, then like the people who irritate us and the people who make us angry in this world is kind of endless, and we cannot begin to confront each and every one of them saying that I want to overcome you. Rather, it's more important to cultivate this sense of forbearance within ourselves. And then if we have such a forbearance in ourselves, then it doesn't matter how many people begin to irritate us, how many people begin to anger us. We have that sense of fortitude against these situations. So as we already discussed a particular verse from Shantideva's A Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, wherein he talks about how the amount of what we deem to be insufferable, intolerable beings in this world is kind of limitless as the sky itself. And if you begin to try to overcome all these beings themselves, then it's an impossible task. Wherein if you are able to conquer one moment of anger in yourselves, or if you are able to conquer one moment of afflictions in yourselves, then that is the more heroic deed. So then these are very important things that we need to remember, these kind of pity instructions given by Shantideva in this Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, wherein we really begin to understand how the cultivation of forbearance makes sense. And then another verse that we also talked about, wherein Shantideva says that if you begin to cover if you begin to cover the whole earth with leather and saying that you don't want to be harmed by the thorns that exist in the world, then it's an impossible task. Rather, it's more sensible to sew yourself a leather shoe and then begin to walk about. So, like that, the practice and cultivation of forbearance is similarly like that. Yes. So then, when we're talking about the practice of forbearance, then due to that constant habituation with the way that we react to adverse situations, then it feels like such a practice does not come naturally to us. This is the experience that we have, and then Shantideva goes on to say that there is no non-virtue as grave as the non-virtue of aversion and anger, and there is no practice as hard as the practice of forbearance. But even if you find the practice of forbearance hard, then it is our responsibility to cultivate this practice in all manners, in all aspects, whether it be not immediately reacting to harsh words, or whether it be through putting some sort of distance between yourself and the person who is beginning to irritate you, or whether it is trying to give the situation some time before you begin to react. So through all these manner, we should really strive to practice forbearance, because we have the experience that such a practice does not come naturally to us.
Can I ask a question? Is acceptance also part of that? So forbearance is patience, right? Yeah, so I just want to understand about acceptance, because I think they're slightly different, but that's probably my biggest issue.
So maybe just to make sure, by acceptance, you mean, let's say in this example, when somebody begins to speak harshly to you, and in that situation, how would acceptance figure into it?
Well, first of all, accept that they're allowed to not like me, and they're allowed to have different opinions than me. But I would say acceptance in general, that different people are different, that things happen as they are, and doesn't mean that I don't want to do something to change it, but I think first of all to accept that reality as it is. And sorry, Tenzin, do you want me to close the fan?
Oh, it's okay for now. I have this.
Okay.
아니 너희 딜라이트 메네라 킬렌라 주라 디도 나만주 미치기 직접으로 시나스라 아니 딜라니 메네 담모 메네 거래라 주라 디 갈라게도나 미창마기 출로 가와지 그 말해래 아니 미창마기 주지 따왔다 주지 시주님도 모두 용 미세어래 말이야 근데 나도 나치도는 신나 아니 지금 미창마 용도 속에 주진와로 가려는 제시와래 킬렌 메네 로주라 어디 레야가 갖고 돌아가요.
시여스 진주는 지기선스라. 제가 기후 담발에 때베가 민지라스라. 들으시다만 시우가 왜 시우나. 아니나 처럼 메라가니 오고요. 히베 문가 민지시. 메라 땅에 들어야 시대 그거와 지고 지고. 내처럼 때려. 때베가
라지 인데레스마. 랑이 인데레네 봐. 지오도
그래서 이 배치 거에도 아주 같이 따라서 배가셔 배치를 가니야 자꾸 친구제라 그래서 배 두는 거 빠시면서 근데 뭐가 스스로라 시대 따라하는 게 왜나 집은 한번 지내서 근데 저거보다
so then the suggestions that the suggestions so then yes, this is true that there needs to be a level of acceptance first before one begins to cultivate forbearance in moments of transgressions. But this acceptance cannot come like only at that instant. It only comes through a constant process of contemplation beforehand. So this is true, and there is a book called The Good Sayings or the Elegant Sayings of Sajja Pandita. Sajja Pandita, which is one of the greatest Tibetan masters of the past, and he begins to kind of elaborate on the good qualities that a learned one begins to practice or incorporate. And then in that he says that when you are praised, you should not become too happy. When you're criticized, then you should not become too sad. So then, so the mark of a learned one is to always cultivate your own qualities, the qualities that are beneficial for yourself first. So this is the mark of a learned one. They know their own qualities and they know the qualities that they need to cultivate without being affected by criticism or praise. So herein even though it does not explicitly say acceptance, but when we look at it, there is a level of acceptance needed to not be affected by criticism or praise.
What's the name of the book?
Such election.
And the name of the book again?
The Elegant Sayings of Sakya Pandita.
The Elegant Things.
Elegant Sayings.
Sage.
Sayings.
Like
Sayings.
sayings.
그거 아니니까. 그 아마 그는 지금 비즈니스 오늘 남자 오늘씩 나오고 있나라. 남자면서 그걸 바깥에 맞아요. 싸움도 땅에. 무슨 거리 냐면지. 내가 엔데 도와. 다 되는 남은 다 소리도 너희들아. 아니 때문에 숨쉬어야지 지금 뭐인지. 맞을로 조지 같은 게 되고. 다만에 따고 진짜 우리 뭐인데 지금 들려지. 그걸 다다로 가태로 무슨 레오는 같이 잡는 그분의 파워라. 라. 대셔에 제가 저거에 지나 하고 이제 내가 스튜디 아니 매화인 사람. 라. 맞아요 지내게. 가라. 늦지요. 간다지 쟁이토도 그 담에 같이 와이나. 이거 쟁이 맞이래서는 근데 거도 그럼 우리 하고 저거 와이나. 쟁이 맞이래서는 담에 거기 주로에는 대만이 그랬어. 근데 지지요 말했어. 간다 아니면 지당 같은 때 거도 우리 정말 자동 무슨 시험하지 봐. 소금 되게 상담이나 그걸 가요 말선 리라. 라. 아무도 지기 아프시 되게 많이 우리 같이 거의 되게 지금 봐. 항상 되게 지지요. 다디 스티 진이들의 코라에 나오지 있어. 라. 그러기 지난 만디네 코라 콘도나 시시그리 디퍼 전도 미스안더스탠딩 코네티네 마가 제시그리 잠자 파기디 콘도나니로 다스이네 오딜레 코라레 내다 코라를 또 까미 있지네 난 남주 지쳐야 돼서. 라. 근데도 다 지금 남는 지요라. 근데 이거 남상 가르쳐야 해.
So then when we're talking about the cultivation of forbearance, then it really needs to come into action when we face a situation where we are being irritated, we are being kind of provoked in these situations. This is the mark of cultivating forbearance. In Tibetan, there is a saying as well as a song which goes along the line of in your intellectual discussions about these practice, you are learned ones, but when it comes to action, then you are a beginner. So this is not the way it should be. It is like a satirical song, wherein you say that when you talk about forbearance and all these talking and like talking about it intellectually, then you begin to sound like a learned one. But when it actually comes to practicing, then even the smallest irritation you begin to become very provoked and you retaliate immediately. Then you show all the signs of a beginner. So this makes the point that forbearance really is a difficult thing. It's just not something that we can get at by only talking about it. We need to kind of internalize these qualities. And it comes from a constant process of contemplation about how in these situations of provocation and transgression, then it could come from a lot of things. Basic acceptance is, a basic kind of acceptance that is needed is that just as you yourself are able to, are liable to be under the influence of the afflictions themselves, then it's natural that as human beings, same human beings, then people are also liable to be affected by the same afflictions. So when you have that basic acceptance, then you have the grounds upon which you can begin to build your practice of forbearance. And then in moments of provocation and transgression, most of the time it's either like there is a misunderstanding between you two. You can try to like bridge that gap of misunderstanding. And then sometimes it is indeed the case that you have inadvertently or unintentionally offended someone. In that case, then it's important to broach that subject, that topic, be forthright with each other. And then it might be the case that even though without any fault of your own, that other person begins to provoke you. And in those situations, most of the time, it is because they are like, you have to try to understand where this person is coming from. There are like adverse things that this person is going through, something difficult that he or she is going through. So that's why maybe he is like helplessly lashing out towards you or to you in this moment. So all of these things we need to take into account to come to a basic acceptance of the situation first. So then, maybe you remember the example that we talked about, that anecdote about someone who says that they are cultivating a practice, and then someone asks, what practice are you cultivating? And this person was sitting in a meditation pose. And then the person said, I'm practicing the cultivation of forbearance. And then the person who was asking immediately said, eat shit. And then the person who was supposed to be cultivating forbearance immediately retaliated, you eat shit yourself. So in that instance, then we understand now what it really means to cultivate practice, and how adverse situations or adverse conditions themselves are in actuality the real and perfect opportunity for us to cultivate our practice. Normally, when we're talking about building a practice, then we think like meditation, staying in retreat, and all that. But maybe this is a very like narrow way of thinking about practice, wherein if life is like experienced in moments and lived by moments, then our practice should also be cultivated in moments. And adverse moments, difficult moments, are the moments when we can really cultivate our practice. And so then, this is not to say that meditating in itself is useless. Of course, if you meditate, then you are using it to contemplate, you are using it to concentrate, then of course it's good. But then if there is no difference in the person who meditates and stays in the retreat and meditates, and then as they come out of the retreat, and if they are the same angry people, same easily provoked people, then what's the point of going to retreat and meditating all the time? Whereas there would be a person who has never afforded the opportunity to meditate or go to retreats, but every day he's trying to practice forbearance, not to retaliate. This is a much more effective practice than like sitting in a meditation pose. Listen.
다 자가 나면 저다 마 제문에 전에 하나사 약속도 되지. 테스트 가지로 다 샤샤 싫으시. 들바 모든 마 보증 이제 지 싫으시는 거. 시부터 진짜 힘도 많더라. 테스트 찍는 파스도 투르투르 이렇게 된 점점까지 다니어서 살아. 현재 질라고 같이 쉬우쉬우지 라기마다. 아니 내로 되다. 미 가시 공부 공부 마음을 이제 젠데스를 봐. 바로 만 생이 쉬우지도. 봐. 내가 저거 하고 미 저거 가지고 공부하고. 계속 그니 투비 내거를 테스트 주지 강의로 제 하슈디에서 공부해서 러시아 제가 좀 아마고 투바나는 나도 뒤에 미상화를 가미티. 봐. 이제 얘기다.
So then, when we are ourselves angry and when we are ourselves very arrogant, then we fail to see the fact that we are not tolerant people, or we are not being reasonable in situations. But then, if we look at other people who are being intolerant and who are being intolerant, and then who are kind of blowing the situation out of proportion, then we begin to understand the effect of the lack of forbearance in situations. An example that we can think about is when we take a cab or a taxi, then generally the taxi drivers are very reasonable people, and they are calm people. But there are instances wherein when two taxis or two vehicles are about to cross each other in those narrow roads, then sometimes even without the cars touching each other, due to the other person not wanting to give an inch, this person not wanting to give an inch, then these two taxi drivers get out of the cars and then block the whole road, and it creates traffic and trouble for everyone. So where does this kind of big trouble arise from? It just comes from one moment that is without forbearance, without tolerance. So we begin to see the effects of lack of forbearance and lack of tolerance in this manner.
그래서 근데 모두 다 밀어 빼셔야 그 콩들랑 되나라. 다들 나서 다들이 지금 저배 말로 가는 데도 지도로. 나코는 어디가 전부 같이 빼서 보고 뭐 두려. 그래서 군다나 보통들에도 아니 지금 같이 кино도. 그래서 다들 말에는 왜 너무 많이 시험을 소치다. 짜라 마다 재미 지제 뭐 여러 없어. 그래서 보고 뭐 두려. 요만이 밑 가리가 하고 그걸 돈이라고. 그런 게 가족 거래야지 커스터머를 주문해서. 라. 이니 밑으로 거를 가지고 막아 차야지. 라. 아니 숨에다 그런 게 주고 가리는 거를 주고를 전에는 정말 세상 되게 그거든.
So then, sticking with the example of a cab driver, then if a cab driver begins to be stressed by that job, and then begins to be intolerant in his dealings with his customers all the time, then it's not good for his health too, to be intolerant all the time, and then two, as he begins to be intolerant with his customers, then there might be instances wherein a customer decides that I'm not going to tolerate all this kind of things, and I'm just not going to take this cab, and then he loses a customer, a source of income, and then these customers begin to talk to their friends that you should not go in that cab. That person always makes a scene out of everything, saying that you're carrying too much luggage, you made me wait too long. So these are the kind of effects of lack of tolerance.
제가 다 근데 이들아 다 말아서 가면은 지금 저거 나가서 빼샤라. 빼는 근데 당장 가서 빼가 많이 이거. 수서 짚으시잖아. 봐. 수서 내가 지금 로봇 하면 수서 수년도 줘야 돼. 일단 진짜 이제 배 구수도 제 어떻게 잠자를 줘야 때 되는 거를 있습니다. 그래서 자라케 잡아지지. 다 지키고 되게 저는 라이브 시시쇼 나는 빨리 걸 집을 못 차. 아. 그는 가서 빨리 그 자라케 잡아지나. 먼저 손에 쳐도 라이브 다 아지는 마음이 빨리 좋아하면 찾아. 나 걔만 들어야 자라 나오시는 리더 직상도. 걔만도 아, 계속 매 땅, 집 땅마다 나야. 그래서 바로 땅 상한다서 저 애들을 칠 어디로. 세상 나라자야 이만 있었다라. 이해해서 보고 얘기지.
So then, as we cite these examples, then maybe it's better to remind ourselves that we need to kind of relate this to ourselves too, and try to think of examples wherein we are intolerant and how it begins to affect our relations, affect our situations. And maybe like let us try to give this example that whenever something does not go right, and then we begin to like we begin to like we begin to think very narrowly in these moments, and we become like very irritated, and then we begin to lash out. And for example, let's say that your group has decided to go on a picnic, and then someone forgot to bring the matchbox. Then if you begin to lash out at the person, oh, you did not bring the matchbox, blah blah blah, all that, then the whole purpose of going to a picnic is now destroyed in that moment. Everybody is in a bad mood, and then now, like, what's the point of going to a picnic in the first place if you cannot let go of like a small thing like that? Rather than that, saying that, oh, it's okay, we can try to figure something out. We can go and buy some in the nearby shops. Maybe we can ask the Indians nearby for some matchbox. If not, maybe we can cook somewhere like there. We can ask a restaurant to cook for us. So this is the kind of attitude one needs to adopt, rather than ruining the picnic for everybody just because of a matchbox. So this is an example, but this is normally like what we do. We blow the situation out of proportion, and then like ruin it not only for ourselves but for everyone that is around us. So then, when we think about forbearance, then maybe we equate it with just patience, just waiting patiently. But this is not. This does not begin to capture the practice of forbearance. I will explore it through as many examples I can, so you have an idea like what it really means to practice forbearance. Now, let's say there is a teacher, and then there is a student who is not performing well in the class and in his studies. So then, if the teacher begins to get irritated by this and saying that I put in the same effort teaching everyone, and the instructions are the same for everyone, why are you not able to catch up with the class? And then this does not help the student. This does not help the teacher in order to kind of help the student too. So rather than that, if the teacher begins to try to not be irritated by someone failing his class, then tries to understand the situation that the student is in. Maybe it might be the case that he's going through some family problems. Maybe he has some health issues that hinders his focus in the classroom, and maybe he has a different way of learning. And so, if the teacher tries to accommodate these things, then this is the practice of tolerance. And if the teacher tries to accommodate these possibilities, then the teacher can now begin to make the situation better for the teacher themselves as well as the students. And then the teacher can begin to ask the student, like, if you have family problems and problems outside of the classroom, then at least during the period that you are in the class, take that time as a respite from those problems. Take this, know that this is a safe space for you. And if he has trouble with the way that the teacher is teaching, then the teacher can say that after class, if you need more help, I can give you extra tuition, extra classes, and so forth. So all of these are, in a sense, the practice of forbearance. So then, if the teacher begins to now become, rather than this, the teacher begins to become irritated with the student and the lack of progress in the student, and then the teacher begins to blame the student, and the teacher begins to criticize the student, and the teacher begins to scold the student. What does this do? This student needs to be motivated. This student needs to be pushed to study. Does this kind of thing achieve that aim? It doesn't help at all. So rather than that, if a teacher begins to try to understand the student's situation, and then tries to motivate the student, and then tries to put in the effort to give him extra tuition, or try to pay him a little bit more attention, then the student is a human being too, and the student begins to realize that, oh, my teacher is doing all this for me. Then he has a sense of responsibility, which gives him that motivation to put the effort required in his studies. And this is the way in which we should understand the importance and importance of the practice of forbearance. And this happens. This is not something that's a hypothetical situation we are talking about. As we have been students ourselves, we know how important it is, the kind of the motivation that we get from our teachers is, the kind of attention that we get from our teacher is. Yes. So then we can now extend this example in our workspace, whether you find yourself in the position of a manager, or whether you find yourself in the position of an associate worker, or someone who works under a manager or a supervisor. Then you need to understand, in both positions you need to accommodate the possibility that someone is acting in a certain way because they are going through some difficult things. And if someone is late to work, then not immediately kind of lash out, take disciplinary actions against these people. Kind of try to give them the space to explain themselves, give them the space to kind of correct their behavior too, rather than always taking disciplinary action and blowing things out of proportion. And similarly, when you are working under the supervision of other people, then you need to try to take into account the fact that the supervisor or the manager has to look after many people's performance. And sometimes you get the sense that something is not fair. It might be the case that because he or she has to look after the work of so many people, then there is a moment of oversight from him. So we need to understand, in both positions, we need to, in in order to avoid unnecessary conflict, unnecessary arguments, it's important to first have a sense of tolerance. Then this is not to say that we should encourage behaviors which kind of begins to exploit us. This is not to say that this is not to say that we should encourage behaviors that begins to abuse our sense of tolerance. In those moments, it's important to kind of speak up, but then we should not let small and one instance of weakness from one person begin to define the relation that we have with each other. That's so then, if we are always angry at the smallest of irritation in our workspace, then can we really begin to do our work properly? Whether you are a manager or whether you are someone being supervised by a manager, this is impossible. If we are always in conflict and angry with each other, then it's impossible to kind of do our own works properly. And this comes from a lack of tolerance, lack of forbearance in these situations. And we also see that many parents, when they see that their children have made a mistake, then they begin to become too agitated, become too stressed, and then there are cases wherein some parents faint when they hear about what their children has done. So this comes from a reaction that indicates the lack of forbearance. And then if we're not careful, then we might also suffer heart attacks due to one moment of anger. So as stress builds up, then in one moment of anger, then there are cases wherein we begin to suffer heart attacks. So not only mentally, but also physically, it has grave consequences. That's So now, as we give these extensive examples, then it is to kind of highlight the defects or the negative qualities of anger, and how, by contemplating on the negative effects of anger, then we begin to understand the importance of cultivating forbearance. For now, another small example is let's say a group of people have gathered to have a dinner together. And then if one person becomes angry, even if the food in front of that person is delicious, then the food begins to lose its taste for that person. Then there is also the danger that this person, out of a moment of anger, begins to throw the whole of. There is this danger that this one person, out of a moment of anger, begins to topple the table itself, ruining the dinner for everyone. So this one moment of anger begins to have such a negative consequence. So this is the importance of cultivating forbearance and tolerance. So then when we begin to think about how, if you say that you have to abandon anger, you should not get angry, and you should abandon anger as a affliction, then we begin to think of anger as something absolute. We begin to think that our anger should be absolutely abandoned. And then it begins to not make sense. Now, rather than that, if we are able to think about like how in moments anger arises and how like these moments of anger affect us negatively in the short term as well as the long term, then we have now the tools with which we can begin to think about abandoning anger as an affliction. Yes. So then, now in the text, in the classical text, then this contemplation on the defects or the negative consequences of anger is stressed. And then there's a particular text which says that aversion and the subsequent anger that we feel due to aversion, the negative effects are you lose experiences of joy, you lose experiences of well-being, and then your mind becomes agitated, and then you begin to lose sleep. So these are the kind of evident negative consequences of aversion and the subsequent anger which arises out of it. Yes. Yes. So then at this point maybe we can remember another verse that we discussed from Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, wherein he says that if something can be remedied, then why have a sense of aversion or aversion towards it, or why worry about it? And then if something cannot be remedied, then why have a sense of aversion to it, or why begin to worry about it? So maybe these kind of things, if we begin to understand their implications, then like the importance of acceptance before building on the practice of forbearance becomes evident. So I really encourage you, if you really want to cultivate your practices, then to refer and try to read Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. Yes. So then, were you able to understand most of it? I hope it isn't the case that I'm speaking too much.
No, but I do have some questions.
Maybe we pick up in the next session, yeah? We break for tea at this point and gather again in half an hour.